Last Saturday's presidential and legislative elections caught the world's attention. Give our audience a sense of the election outcomes, both presidential and legislative. Any surprise from the party's point of view?
I think the presidential elections largely fell in line with expectations, so to say, that while we secured a victory, we did not secure a majority. On the legislative part, I will say we did slightly better than I think some people had expected. Although it's not been a perfect result, obviously, we were not able to secure a legislative majority like we did in 2016 and 2020. But nevertheless, I think it wasn't a weak showing, particularly in the South.
And Ryan, what about the reactions from Washington, D.C.?
I think Taiwan has shown the way for the United States. We have our own election later this year, and I hope that it resembles and reflects the experience that Taiwan just provided for us. My own sense is that most people in Washington expected the outcome that we saw in the election. In terms of President Biden's comments, my presumption is that he wanted to make the point that if there are troubles in the Taiwan Strait, they will not be troubles of America's making. They will not be troubles of Taiwan's making.
But what will be the message be between now and May 20th inauguration?
Over 80% of our people support the status quo. This has been reinforced again and again. I mean, any party that's going to deviate away from the status quo simply isn't going to get the majority of public opinion here. And so for the DPP, I mean, we're here to win elections. We're here to stand with the people. We're here to reflect the people. And the people want the status quo. We want the status quo. And we certainly hope Beijing ends up supporting the status quo as well.
How has this trilateral, meaning US, Taiwan, China relations, changed over time since you've been involved in the work for so long? And will the elections change this relationship or not?
During the Chen Shui-bian era, there was genuine concern that we could find ourselves in a conflict not of our choosing because of actions that were being taken out of Taipei. During the Ma Ying-jeou era, there was a real sense that the relationship across the Taiwan Strait was converging, that there was deepening integration, and that the United States may have a lesser role going forward in the future than it had in the past. And during the Tsai Ing-wen administration, I think that there has been a real recognition of sort of stability and predictability in Taiwan. There has been an ebb and flow to the US-China-Taiwan triangle. It has not traveled in a straight line. It has gone up and down, and I expect that will continue going forward into the Lai administration.
So Vincent, and everyone seems to be expecting if Beijing is going to take some actions to show its frustration and anger towards the election results, is Taipei prepared for any potential punishment from Beijing?
Well, let me just start by saying how unfortunate we're having the discussion at all, because I think ultimately the people of Taiwan do want peace, but also want respect for our democracy and our democratic achievements. And by punishing Taiwan for our democratic choices, that's not going to win hearts and minds here in Taipei. And I do think that ultimately it's counterproductive what China's engaged in. And ultimately it feels like it's serving a domestic purpose rather than a larger kind of diplomatic or cross-strait intention that they may have in mind in the long term.
So the first sort of yardstick that I would suggest is that there'll be more continuity than discontinuity in the way that Beijing approaches things. The second is that I think that Beijing is going to want to try to preserve escalation space. In other words, to go slow and steady and ratcheting their way up an escalation ladder rather than going straight to the top. Because they don't know what is going to happen in the future, and they want to preserve the ability to increase their response to events that they are opposed to.
What's the chance of Beijing and Taipei actually engage in any dialogue in the next 4 years?
The fact of the matter is that no one can predict Beijing's responses for the simple reason that they're not tied to basically the rationality we see on the diplomatic stage. There's a lot of different factors that are factoring in at this point. Domestic politics, the domestic economic sentiment, social pressures, political pressures within the CCP. And so much of that takes place behind the scenes that it's almost impossible, I would argue at this point, for anybody to predict with any amount of certainty kind of where policies are going to lead within the CCP.